Welcome back to the Informal Game. My name's Griff. I got Chris over there behind the camera. Today I want to talk a little bit about something you find in every fantasy campaign, and that's these things, castles. So stay tuned. Castles. That's something that everybody sooner or later is going to want in their campaign. And I thought it would be something interesting to talk about. So let's just get right to it. If you want a castle in your game, you're gonna want to get some paper like this, and you're gonna want to get some pens like this. Usually, what I use is a pencil, like a mechanical pencil, or even just the plain old number 2 pencil to draw my castles and things, because I can later go back and ink over it, or I can just leave it as pencil, and it's easy to alter what I've drawn before. But since we're doing a YouTube show, I want to make sure that you can follow along, so I'll be using some of these guys that I have down here, just so they're a little bit more visible. The thing to think about when you're making castles, I guess, the main thing is that the first thing that's there when you think of castles is that there's a landscape. And a castle doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Somebody gets granted the land. The whole realm is usually owned by whoever the major noble is in the area, whether it's a king or a prince or an earl or whoever. And they will grant land to people where they can go build a castle, and it's sort of expected that they will help protect the realm. A lot of times you have places that are just frontier forts, just like little watchtowers and things like that. So I thought I would come up with something along those lines, and we could just develop it and just kind of do it as we go. The landscape, a lot of times you also look for water. Water's a really essential commodity that you see. And so like maybe you might have a river like so. And your river might be at a confluence of 2 rivers, so it might be very strategically important. And so you have a very big river here, something that possibly is navigable. And so you could imagine barges or maybe even small sailboats traveling up and down the river for commerce purposes. And so you have this large, slow-moving river. And the purpose of the castle, obviously, is to keep an eye on this area and make sure the bad guys don't come through here. But the people you want come through here, and they're trading and bringing in goods and helping the economy. They're taking what your people here make and taking it somewhere else. And it's just, trade is something that always happens when you get a bunch of people together. So the first thing you want to do, as I've drawn here, is you've got this river. Maybe we want to add in maybe like a little sandbar here. Sometimes you get, sandbars. If you want to get really picky about your river, you can even go in and mark where it's deepest. Like maybe there's a channel, and a navigator may be the only one who really knows where the deep parts are. And so, like, there's a sandbar there. Maybe the deep side is over here. And so you can sort of get an idea of, like, this is the deep channel on this side, and on the other side it's a little bit more shallow. Things like this are sometimes useful. You don't have to obsess over these things. I just thought I would mention it because it's important if you want to do sort of a sailing-based campaign to know what the landscape below the water is. And then, of course, you start to add in other details. Your banks are like sort of your basic. You're starting to think about relief. What's the landscape like outside of the river here? Are there hills? Is it just plains and things like that? And so you can add relief lines outside of your river to show what's going on there. I won't draw over here because I just want to get into this. Maybe our sandbar is a little bit bigger and it goes all the way out here. And obviously you see that I don't draw very well, and it doesn't matter, because what matters is that I'm making a map, and it's going to end up being used in my campaign at some point. Interesting ideas you can have is that, obviously, if you have a river, I guess I will draw this in. And I'm thinking, this castles are associated Well, a lot of times they're just little castles by themselves, but the minute you build a castle or a fort, it's something out on the frontier, the people living there start to congregate around these places because there are other people there, and most of all, there's safety. It's not completely lawless when you get near a fortress, or people will assume at least that it's not completely lawless. That can be up for grabs, obviously. So yeah, I mean, we've got this area here. We can start to do like sort of relief lines, like maybe there's a hill that comes up here, and there's another level of hill here, and as we go up, we get maybe even another level, like over here, right? So there's sort of a tall area up here, and maybe that leads to another area here, and this area has sort of a, maybe right here. This actually, see, when you draw squiggles sometimes, you see I'm drawing these squiggles, I'm not even thinking about it. You will sometimes find yourself drawing things that are a little bit more interesting. Like, what if I just make something taller here, and like some kind of hill, and I create some sort of a like an even taller area, like a little, just like a spire that comes out of that hill over there. And we can take this, if we do the relief lines really close together. Obviously, I'm just sketching here, so it's not going to be perfect. You're gonna look at this and think, well, that's kind of sloppy, Griff, and that's okay, because that's about the level that I'm at, is sloppy. So we have a landscape here, you see, and you've got this river that's coming down through here. Got the nice sandbar, and you've got this hill that's going up, and this ridge that for some reason it's broken. Maybe, I don't know, 500 years ago, maybe this river wasn't here. Maybe it was coming through here and joining the river here, and it's since found an easier channel and come down this way. What's cool, though, is that at some point, and I'll do this in maybe an obnoxious color like this sort of fuchsia type color, somebody might have decided that this little sticky uppy little spire here would be the perfect place to build a tower. And so somebody built a tower there. It could be something that was built in antiquity. You don't even know, maybe there are rumors about why it was there. It could have been just a little outpost fortress. Maybe it was the fortress that a wizard built, like a tower that he built, and he wanted to live out by himself, he or she, and just work on whatever wizards do out in the wilderness. What's interesting is that if you look at the original game, I always have to bring up the original game rules. There is some basic information on building castles in these books here. Let me see if I can find the page quickly. It should be quick enough. It's page 20, I think. Yeah, there we go. It's page 20. So we've got this here. This is the sort of guideline we had when D&D first came out. It listed the prices of things, how much a 90-foot section of 10-foot deep curtain wall would cost you 3,500 gold pieces. And it shows examples of things, which of course you can elaborate on that and come up with your own way of designing these things. Not every society is going to have the exact same kind of castles, but it's a good reference that you find in these books. So let's get back to this guy. I just wanted to talk about, like, we've got this castle. Maybe the castle, and like I said, I'm using this color because it's just more visible. Initially, when they built this castle, it's on this high ridge. It might have been easier to bring stuff up along this slope here because it's a milder slope, and they might have built a wood bridge across here. But now maybe the wizard built like a big arch bridge that goes across at some point. And so you've got this incredibly long, dramatic arch over this little chasm there. What happens, of course, obviously over time, is that people find places like this and they elaborate on them. If you look at all the cities throughout at least in Europe and anywhere in Europe, you'll see cities that started out maybe as Roman cities, or maybe they were some other civilization long before that, and then somebody came along, they built another thing there, and then somebody came along, they built onto that. And so we have this original Wizard's Tower up here, and maybe somebody came along and decided to build their own castle here. And a lot of times you'll see castles, they don't follow, they don't really feel standardized because they follow the landscape, because it's easier to just build with what's there instead of having to haul stuff in, especially when you had to haul it in by hand. And so you could have a castle with a large castle here. Maybe this area is a large building, and these are curtain walls, and within the curtain walls they might have had more buildings on the inside. And maybe you've got some sort of gate here. I'll mark the gate in black just to show you that you've got a gate there. Maybe we'll put it over here. I think over here is good because we've got this little hill here, and we can maybe have imagine that there's like a road that comes down here and kind of over the slope and winds around sort of down the slope. Obviously each level of terrain we're not looking at Lego blocks, we're looking at hills and things like that. So you've got this little road that comes down. Later on, after building that castle, I guess we want to build some more building into our castle. And they've always got, if you look in castles, they've always got a well, water source. That well can go down. If these differences in terrain change are maybe 50 feet, there's a well going down a couple 100 feet, so you can reach the water level, the water table where the river is. So there's a nifty little castle. We might see that over time they would have added something, and they would have added, maybe there are towers, and you go around and there are towers, and they would take the natural landscape here, and you can sort of you can imagine maybe this change in height on this side is a little bit more steep, so you can put some lines there to show that instead of being like a long slope, it's literally going up like that. And so that, again, they're using a natural terrain feature, this sort of ridge, this steep ridge, to create a safe place to build their castle. So we're just moving along. We got our castle here. We might as well, I won't do every detail. The other side might be like that too. Let's see here. So yeah, they would have built some walls to add on to it. Maybe these walls come this way, and you got a tower here. They would have followed that natural shape that they see there to create their area, and maybe they had like a big reinforced gate here. Same thing going this way. And as you see, it's not perfect the way I drew it. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll draw things like this, and then I'll take it and I'll redraw it a little bit better after I get my basic design down. So obviously this is just kind of like the first draft we're looking at here of the castle. As the castle evolves, what you might see is that it has like a town will appear around the castle. We've got the inner ward and the outer ward, and a town will appear around that. And you're probably wondering, like, how does Griff know all this stuff about castles? Well, when I was a kid, my first gamer group would meet at the library. So we would meet on Saturday mornings at the public library. And we were literally gaming in the stacks sometimes. There were tables that were in the middle of all the book stacks, and we'd just throw down our backpacks, get out our books, and play D&D for 6 to 8 hours a day or something like that. And around 1977, see, this is the secret, this thing came out. So if you want to build a castle like this, there are all kinds of really cool things you can find. If you go to your local library, I think, I don't know, just go to your local library and look for, I guess they don't have card catalogs anymore, Go to a local library, look at the computer, dial up books on castles, and you're going to get all kinds of things. And in that, you're going to get this, which is sort of a basic primer on castles. I won't go through the whole book, but this was kind of, well, it wasn't even kind of. I won't go through the whole book, but this was essentially my initial resource for what I knew about castles when I was a kid. And it goes through everything. It's pretty fascinating, and it's sort of written for kids, but I think even as an adult, it's an amazing overview on how to do a castle for your game. Even these pages here, like talking about just the tools, the kind of tools that would have been used, the materials, everything that it covers. That, you know, here's your different specialists that would appear and be doing the various jobs, and including the Master James dog down here. But it's a great book. I mean, the illustrations are great. So I kind of use this. Here's the sort of the final version of the castle. You've got your castle over here. You've got an outer wall, and you've got a city within the castle, but obviously the population has expanded so much that now you've got people living outside the castle. So there's all kinds of fun stuff to be found in this book. It even talks about siege tunnels. I believe that's a siege tunnel being built right there. They're digging under the foundations of the wall, and it's all reinforced, and they're going to create this cavity, and then once the cavity's ready to go, they're going to burn all the supports, and that will bring the wall down during a siege. And my guess is pretty good, because right here I see a siege engine on fire and a battering ram pounding on the wall there. Anyway, just to keep going on this, if you want a good resource for castles, this book is the one. There we go. There's a nice shot of the castle that they have here. So if you want a resource for your own castles, I would say something like this. I'm not saying you have to get exactly this book, but this one is really good, and it's sort of a great primer. And there are other books like that. So let's get back to just doing our little castle really quickly. We've got our castle, we've got our tower, we've got our arch bridge. Maybe we build something strange on here. Like maybe there is a strange platform on pillars out here. It's flat. It's a strange flat thing. What if your players find this and it's a ruined castle? Nobody's living here, but they find this strange platform out here, and then maybe they might find a scroll somewhere in a dungeon somewhere that talks about how people a long time ago used to use flying machines to go around, and maybe that platform is where they would land their blimps and things like that. Who knows? Or maybe it's a dragon landing platform. It's really up to you what you want to make it into. And that's the same thing with even over here, like if you wanted to, let's say maybe different kinds of people lived here, right? And so perhaps there is a tunnel here, and that tunnel goes into the ground, and somewhere off this way there's a whole underground mine complex where the dwarves lived. It's not just a mine, there's also like living quarters and temples and things like that, and so the dwarves somewhere underground, you've got a dungeon you can design, lived over here underneath the hill. And the same thing here, like maybe there are these really ancient trees, and maybe the trees have been here so long that they're just leafless. They're kind of dormant. For some reason they've gone dormant. And this is another myth. Maybe if elves come back and live here, the elves will know how to speak to the trees and get them to come back to life. And so you've got these ancient 2,000, 5,000-year-old trees that are just right over here. Maybe there's still remnants of rope bridges that come from the castle wall over connecting these trees to the castle. And so you've got an interesting area to explore. There are platforms still on the trees. Maybe the elves left platforms. So you've got an aerial sort of dungeon space that players can go and explore that's now inhabited by bad things. And the whole goal is to clear it out, and maybe the elves will invite other elves, if you have elves in your party, to come and wake the trees up and create a place where the elves can live. And that's kind of the interesting thing about a place like this, is that we're building a castle here. It's pretty basic, right? Well, you can use it as an inhabited castle, right? And so you get here, and you get to look at the map, but you're not really going to interact with the castle because somebody lives there. You may not even be invited into the castle, right? So maybe there's, like I said about there being a city, maybe there is a bridge over the river here, and maybe it has a drawbridge in the middle so that it can keep strangers out with towers at each end. And the road comes out and winds down, and you've got like a, perhaps, I'll just sketch it in really fast here. Perhaps there's a whole ruined city down here. Or it's a city where your players may be inclined to go and spend some time if it's an inhabited city, but you've got a town gate here and a castle wall that goes back up and connects with that. We can do the same thing over here. We just keep drawing little towers. Obviously, I am speed drawing right now. This is just working really fast. The elves probably wouldn't want to be enclosed in the castle. So we might need another gate over here. I'll just draw a little gate over here. But what you see here is you have this town. If it was inhabited, your players would be playing down in the lower area. They would know this stuff is up here, but there may not be any reason for them to go there or be invited there. But down here you would start drawing in streets and buildings. I won't go into all of that. And you would create a town that's associated with the castle. So you got your inner ward, which is kind of the last stand of defense. The outer ward, which is more like where you would have your soldiers would have barracks and things like that. And then you have the outer curtain wall that protects the citizens most of the time, and also you can close the gates at night and keep ruffians out and such. So that's an idea for a city there. But really I was wanting to focus on the castle mostly there. I guess I'm ending up talking about cities because it's hard to talk about castles without talking about cities. So if you think of maybe you're starting a campaign and you don't really know what to do with your campaign. What if you just put the most interesting point of interest? You literally have your players find a map to an ancient abandoned city. And they go there and they find what you've drawn, something like this, right? And you've got buildings. Most of the buildings are crumbled and fallen apart. But they go up to the castle and they discover that there's maybe over the bridge to the wizard's place, or down in the dwarf place, or here in the elf place, there are these dungeons to explore. And they go down and they explore. And they find treasures and things. So they got money to spend, right? And you've conveniently provided them with a castle to live in. All they've got to do is make sure that nothing can come out of the dungeon over the bridge and get to them. And after they clear out the trees, probably nothing will be living in the trees. And if they do the same thing with the dwarf nut mines and maybe put some solid doors there, your players can start a campaign where they actually just get a free castle to play in. It's something to think about as an option. So that's pretty much how I go about doing castles. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important to think about castles. I also think it's important to really support your local library. You can go to your library and just, this is, you can probably spend an hour with this just in your library without checking it out and have a really good time learning about castles. And like I said, you might find other books. This is just the one I'm familiar with. That's kind of an interesting thing. I didn't really plan on doing anything on cities. I wanted to do something on castles. But castles are so intrinsically connected to cities and other things around them. You got to imagine that all the lands around here are going to be lands that people were farming. It might even be possible that you've got, I don't know, maybe there's a road coming off this way. I'll just draw the road in this color just for now. But you got this road that comes off this way from this gate, and maybe a bunch of halflings built homes along here. So you got a bunch of hobbit holes, and so you got, maybe they're a unique kind of hobbit, the fisher hobbits that like to go down to the river and go fishing. You add something like that in, there's another element. Even as an abandoned place, who's living in these hobbit holes? Did somebody dig them even deeper? I always like to emphasize that what you're doing with your campaign, even when you're drawing something like this, is that you're creating a launching point, even for yourself. If you get out a piece of paper and start drawing a landscape and you have no idea what's going to go in there, once you start putting things in there, you're just the possibilities are so endless that you just keep adding on and adding on. And if you don't lock it in, just leave these things as little beginning points. So when you start to run your campaign, these things are going to be launch points for your players to go dig around in, and things will evolve as they explore. And you don't even have to develop every little detail in these maps, because you can even talk to your players at the end of a session and say, okay, you guys went through and you cleared the dwarf mine area, and there were balrogs down there and you got rid of them somehow. What are you thinking of doing next week? And they'll, here's the map. What are you planning on doing next week? And they can tell you ahead of time. Well, we think we're going to go over and check out those hobbit holes and see what's going on there. That might need to be cleared out. And so your players help you know what you need to work on, what you need to develop. Otherwise, there's just going to be too much to create. The other thing I would emphasize is just these areas here. I haven't developed them. Like I said, it can be abandoned. Maybe these, if it was a medieval city, it's possible most of this was wooden structures that are now completely just eaten away, and just foundations are here. There might be temples and things like that. There might be some sort of meeting building. Anything you can think of that you find in real cities, you would put down here. Even this area where the sandbar is, maybe the sandbar is covering something up, and there's an underground and underwater place that water creatures live in that you can have your players explore over here. The bridge, likely the bridge would be where people would have tied up boats. Maybe this side is not only a bridge but also sort of a dock where people would bring goods and unload them so they could take them into the city. I didn't think of that ahead of time. I just looked at this and I said, well, what can this be useful for beyond just being a bridge? What can this be beyond being just a sandbar? Think of your campaign as a place of possibility and open yourself up to these things, and you'll create all kinds of wonderful places for your players to go and explore. This piece of paper right here, you could probably turn this into a year's worth of campaign just in this area if it was an abandoned castle. Thanks for checking out our show again. If you go to our website, you can find a lot of information, especially Arnicon, which is a convention we run every year in Minneapolis. So you might want to look at that. And we'll see you next time on The Informal Game.